Good afternoon, dear viewers. Today I have a special guest from Tel Aviv, Israel, human rights activist and friend of Eritrean refugees, Sigal Kook Avivi. Sigal, welcome to ERISAT.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Sigal and dear viewers, I will do transitional music and we'll come back and then have a discussion.
كدالو إريتراوي يعرب عنو تلمنيانا يعرب عنو 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 سلاينا تدخيمو مكرانا تزازيمو والحنا بنو مسيلا تسعتا أهلا لكن يلا معدو شكرنا نفاسي وسلو متغغب كينولو وتسعز بنا تدالو إريتراوي يعرب عنو تلمنيانا يعرب عنو تدالو إريتراوي يعرب عنو تلمنيانا يعرب عنو كعرب ينبري أزقوا صنيحو أتاريلونا نديو كم ثمن بريحو إريترانا بلاي كمسل بعافو أي بديرنا نديو انتايك قديم سواري لوس أنا هبتن كيفو يسنابتالو بسدا قديفو تدالو إريتراوي يعرب عنو تلمنيانا يعرب عنو تدالو إريتراوي يعرب عنو تلمنيانا يعرب عنو ماني خايب تمرر زل خايب نمر لنا نقرم عدنا اخدم عيكريبو عبدن بسنحنا مصانا ماني خيب تروب عزل خيب نمر لنا نقريم عدي تزيس سقوقنا تواهي وفردي مصانا نملسلو وان أخيلو تعاليقنا فقارو خلو ملك فريسو فتحرقيسو وقين وري وقين كابها قرنا خطفيو العداديتاتك نكت عدنا سلام كخوينيو سلام كخويني سلام كخويني سلام كخويني سلام كخويني سلام كخويني عبيت مصانا عدي مصانا نتوم زعقبونا مسكينا قبيتنا في قد حزينا مصانا حبنوا عدنا كمنيانا طفي بمصادنا على البليرنا دفعنا بكتس بمصادنا حبنوا عدنا كمنيانا طفي بمصادنا على البليرنا دفعنا بكتس بمصادنا تدالو قزانا تدالو سرانا تدالو عما تتفعلو نحاوري ألس حرستاي نقدي من سيحنا قديكم تمهرو قبرش برات فيكونا حورو تدالو قزانا تدالو سرانا تدالو عما تتفعلو نحاوري ألس حرستاي نقدي من سيحنا
All right, again, welcome back, Sigal. Today we'll have a discussion with regard to the situation in Tel Aviv in Israel and in general also about the Eritrean refugees in Israel. You are a human rights activist and also a refugee advocate. Before I start, I'm going to read some of your bio for our viewers, okay? Sigal Kook Avivi is a social and human rights activist. Avivi was one of the main petitioners to the Israeli Supreme Court in what was ultimately a successful effort to halt the expulsion of asylum seekers in 2018. She continues to work in the field of human rights, working directly with the Israeli refugee and asylum seeking population. In 2018, Kook Avivi won the Yashayu. You can help.
Ishayahu. Ishayahu.
Yashayahu. Yes, Yashayahu. And then what's the next one? What?
Leibovich. Very
Leobi.
difficult.
Okay,
Leibovich.
yeah. All right. Prize for her important work with the refugee and the asylum seekers in Israel. In the past 12 years, Sigal turned all her resources and energy into fighting for the moral character of Israeli society, aiming to stop the expulsion of Africans who seek asylum within Israel and allowing them to stay until they can return to their country safely. She began to teach Hebrew to the refugees, and shortly after, she found herself visiting Halot facility once a week, immersed in a daily struggle to recognize asylum seekers as a refugee and to improve their lives. After human rights organizations almost gave up on fighting with the government and the High Court of Justice, which authorized the deportation of a third country, Rwanda, Sigal led a petition to the High Court of Justice with another 119 citizens. In March 2018, the High Court ordered the government to freeze the deportation process following that petition. So you have been doing a lot of work with the refugees, not only Eritreans, but in general with all the African refugees. So this is a brief bio of yours, but can you tell us a little bit what you are doing currently?
Well, currently, there is no specific organization of the asylum seekers at this point. So most of the work I've been doing these 2 past years are trying to assist families or individuals in Israel struggling with many different issues, whether it's the issue of separation in school, children that have problems with. We have a lot of children now that are coming of age and they trying to get some sort of education, all kinds of basically more personal issues than in the past, because the past it was more issues that dealt with the community as in large.
Okay. All right.
And this last week, unfortunately, I'm dealing with the issue of I was aware of the organization that they plan to demonstrate in front of the facility that had hosted the Eritrean government, the embassy of the Eritrean festival. And now we're trying to figure out what to do with the cases that are brought into court. And basically, I'm running around many studio outlets trying to discuss about this issue, because the Israeli society is quite surprised in light of the violence that happened on Saturday. So this last week has been crazy.
Yeah, definitely. We will come to that discussion later. But let's start with the current Israeli immigration law and the condition of Eritrean refugees. What can you tell us, about in general the immigration law of the Israeli as a country, and also the situation and condition of Eritrean refugees?
Okay, so basically, Israel officially never had an immigration law. Israel always claims that it has no official policy. Asylum seekers started coming into Israel at the end of 2006, I think, or at the beginning of 2006. Most of the people that came in at those years were South Sudanese and Sudanese that were fleeing from Egypt and had no other choice other than to cross the peninsula, the Sinai Peninsula, and enter Israel. A few years later, the Eritreans started coming in. Israel as I said, claims it has no policy, but I always say that its unofficial policy was to deport as much as possible, as soon as possible. Israel has no, even though it has agreed to the Refugee Convention, and it was also one of the initiators of this convention, Israel never dealt with refugees in the past. Even though we had refugees in Jordan and Egypt and Lebanon and Syria all around us, Israel was kind of the spoiled child of the Middle East and did not take in refugees, claiming that it's a Jewish state, it's a small state, we only have one state. So when the refugees started coming in, what Israel started to do was actually, it was kind of it's called a hot return. They would the soldiers that would meet the asylum seekers on entering Israel would actually return them to Egypt. And sometimes it was like one of the refugees told me it was like a ping pong thing. They would like throw them back to Egypt, and Egypt would throw them back into Israel, and back and forth. A lot of people were killed in Sinai in general. A lot of asylum seekers were killed, but when a lot of them reached Israel, sometimes they even reached Israel, entered Israel, were kept in a military base for a night or so, and then in a day after, they were actually again thrown back into Egypt. So this was very, it caused a lot of deaths and so on. The reserved military, the people that do not serve serve as reserved military, which are much older than the young soldiers, started coming back home and saying that this is what's happening, that there are refugees coming in through the border and Israel is throwing them back. And that was so that created some sort of uprising, and the government of Israel just understood it's unlawful. Basically, it did not look into the issue of who's asylum seeker, who's not asylum seeker. They would be kept in a detention center in the south, near where they entered, and then they were like released to wherever they want to go, mostly to Tel Aviv, and they weren't given any conditions, housing, nobody checked them medically. No, but they were just left to their own for a long time. Some of them would sleep in a in a garden near to the old bus station. And there weren't that many refugees at the beginning. We had like a few 10,000s or something like that. But they started coming across the border more and more. The peak was in 2011 and 2012. We had at that point in Israel somewhat about 55,000 asylum seekers from Africa, whether it's South Sudan, Sudan, and mostly Eritrea. And people started talking about the fact that, Israel is going to be stormed by millions of Africans, and we have to stop this. What Israel did was two main things. One of the things is they built a big fence. They started building a fence in 2012 to prevent refugees or whatever coming through the border. They also started renewing a law, an old law. It was called an anti-infiltration law. This law used the Israeli state in the 1950s. In the early 1950s, it was meant to keep the Palestinians, by the way, that were pushed out of their territory to Jordan. And when they tried to come back into their lands in Israel, Israel would call them infiltrators and labeling them as people that are coming into Israel in order to do violent activities to harm the Israeli society. And it's important for you to understand this, because the word infiltrator in Hebrew was a word that nobody used in these past years, because there was a state in Jordan, a state in Israel, and the people from the Palestinians in Jordan stopped trying to come into Israel. They understood that it's hopeless. And the word kind of died. The Minister of Interior in 2012, he is a very cynical man, of course, right wing. He labeled the asylum seekers that at that point The Israelis didn't know how to call them. They called them migrant workers, they called them refugees. They didn't have a determination for them. And he labeled them as infiltrators. Therefore, it meant for many Israelis, if the word infiltrator meant something like fadayun. Fadayun are people that are coming into Israel to cause harm, mayhem, actually. So it made a connection of the asylum seekers as people that are our enemies, people that are coming in to harm us, people that are coming in illegally. Then he introduced the amendment to the anti-infiltration law, which in 2012, which allowed the government to keep the asylum seekers that came into Israel in a jail facility for at least 3 years. The organizations, the human rights organizations, appealed against this, saying it was, of course, inhumane, and you know, these are basically refugees, and we as a country have to deal with them as refugees. And since then, what happened? There was like a ping pong between the state and the organizations, going back and forth, trying to create some sort of recognitions for the asylum seekers. Until 2013, the state told asylum seekers that they should not apply, they should not ask for their, how do you call it, RSD, refugee status determination, because they are covered under group protection. Now, I want to stop and say something about group protection. Group protection around the world, as you may know, normally is a tool that states use when you have an influx of refugees coming into the country, and it's very difficult for the state to determine who's a refugee and who's not a refugee in a very short time. So they give them this, what you call a group protection, which protects them not only from being deported back to their countries or whatever, but also it gives them sort of housing and medical opportunities and educational opportunities until their refugee status is determined, whether they're refugees and they can stay, or they're not refugees and no harm will be if they are going to be sent back. Israel cynically had no intention of checking the refugee status for these people. I think the interest is, this is now my estimation, okay? Israel does not want non-Jews in its territory. Israel does not want people that are called refugees in the Israel territory, because I think it will have to deal with the Palestinian refugees that we have deported since 1948. I think Israel is very much afraid of claiming, okay, this is a refugee and we have to give him his rights. Plus, there's also this issue of we are a Jewish state and only Jews should be here. Of course, it's ridiculous because we have from the sea to Jordan, we actually have the same amount of Jews and Palestinians. A lot of them are kept under occupation with no rights, but in general, we're kind of blind to what's happening in our own state. So in 2013, we started, I think it was 2013, 2014, we started as activists preparing the refugee status for refugees as an act of defiance, as an act of saying these are refugees and you have to have them fill in their refugee status, and you have to acknowledge that they are refugees. What we found out by mistake, okay, because until that point we knew that Israel does not accept any refugee status requests. We found out that Israel will accept, was willing to accept the requests, not to give in any to approve or not approve. So we filled in a lot of refugee status, and we started, and also because of what I said between the ping pong between the Supreme Court and the government, Israel started opening another facility, detention facilities, to keep the asylum seekers cholot, because the Supreme Court said that it was unlawful to keep them detained in the Saharonim prison without, for 3 years or so. Actually, what happened each time that there was appeal against the government policy, we ended up with the government creating something worse. And in 2013, at the end of 2013, the beginning of 2014, the government opened a detention, what they called an open detention center. It was called Cholot. And it started not only putting the asylum seekers that came into Israel, but also pushed the asylum seekers that were already in Israel for a few years, and they were starting to build some sort of life for themselves. They also had to go to the detention center, to Cholot, which is something that I don't think happened in any other country. You have countries not allowing refugees to come in, or putting them in some sort of camp, or like in Australia on an island. But you never had a situation of a country taking people that already live in the city, in the country, and starting to build a life for themselves, actually taking them back and putting them in a detention center. We had an enormous uprising. I mean, the asylum seekers created an unbelievable and wonderful and creative uprising, non-violent, of course, where the Sudanese and the Eritreans cooperated against the government's policy. Unluckily, it wasn't too helpful the people were sent to Cholot. We petitioned against the issue of Cholot, and from a detention center that was supposed to keep the asylum seekers forever, until they of course left, it started shifting. It was 20 months, it was a year and a half, and then it ended up being a year. This enabled Israel to deport what is called willfully. It wasn't deportation by force. It was willfully. They called it they said that the state said that the people are leaving Israel willfully. And this caused a lot of asylum seekers, both South Sudanese and Eritreans, to leave Israel in great numbers, by the thousands. The state of Israel knew that it can't return asylum seekers to Sudan and to Eritrea. So it created another kind of version of soft return, I called it. They would be sent to Uganda and Rwanda, so-called third countries. Of course, I went to by the way to Uganda in 2016 to try to understand the method that was being put in place, and it was a very cynical method. My understanding is that what Israel needed was some sort of a revolving door because of Article 33 in the refugee declaration. I'm missing the word. In the cords of the human rights courts, claiming that you cannot you could not push back, you could not send whatever it was, whether asylum seeker or non-asylum seeker, you cannot send them back to a place that can inflict danger to them, or can danger their life or liberty. So Article 33 is something that we are obligated, so-called, to. But what Israel created, that if they would send them to the third country that would be rather safe, then we have no responsibility for them. What Israel would do is would send them to Rwanda and Uganda. In Rwanda, they would be deported within 48 hours. In Uganda, the story was that they can stay in Uganda. When they left Uganda, they were told that they would be able to receive a refugee status, and they would live safely. Of course, this was not true. And Uganda has different methods of pushing these asylum seekers out of Uganda. And then therefore they were transferred into smugglers' hands. They're smuggled through either to Ethiopia, or most likely the route from Uganda to South Sudan, Sahara Desert, and then to Libya, trying to reach Europe via the sea. Many people died in this route. Many people were sold into slavery. We know that people ended up being murdered by the Daesh. Uh, there are many difficulties for the asylum
Yeah.
seekers in
Mhm.
this route. And also, and I don't know if you know, in March 2016, there was something called the Malta Agreements, the Malta Secret Agreements, where Europe, the I'm sorry, how do you call it? The EU, the
Mhm.
European Union, has agreed with Libya, Tunisia, and various different countries to prevent asylum seekers from coming through the sea.
Mhm.
And we know that the numbers beforehand, we know that a lot of people died either in the desert or in the sea or in Libya, but we know that since March 2016, we know that the sea is kind of more or less a closed route. So a lot of people ended up are still in Libya. And I assume that you know the situation in Libya.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
So basically, and Israel has turned not only a blind eye, but Israel basically created a situation where it can override the Article 33 to the Refugee Convention, where we do not take responsibility. And when we tried to bring this up to the Supreme Court, and the answer would be, but they're leaving on their own will, so on and so forth. What happened next in around between, actually it started much earlier, the preparation for that, but basically around 2000 and let's say 16, 17, Israel that decided that not enough refugees are leaving Israel, and they wanted more refugees leaving. They understood that the fact that Cholot was only for 1 year, that people can stick it out, basically. And they started thinking that they were going to work under not the anti-infiltration law, but under the law of entry of Israel, which gives Israel the option to basically detain somebody until he's willing to leave if he's not legal. And Israel never really processed the refugee status determination and never really accepted these refugees as what they are. You have only around maybe 20 or 30 asylum seekers that received not a full refugee status, but a temporary, what you call a temporary permit or
Mhm.
temporary citizenships. You do have a situation where a few of the Sudanese have received this status because there was a petition to the Supreme Court law again by the fact that nobody checked their refugee status determination. And this wasn't done for the asylum seekers, from the Eritrean asylum seekers, for some reason.
Mhm.
I don't know why. I think the organizations thought they had more chance maybe to do this for the Sudanese. But basically, what you have is, since 2006, asylum seekers coming into Israel. By the way, the influx stopped around 2015 because the fence was completely built. And I must say that I know not only the fence has stopped the asylum seekers, but also a practice that I heard soldiers tell me, where if the asylum seekers started to climb over the fence, the Israelis would notify the Egyptian army, and they would actually be, I'm sorry to say this, but shot on the border. So the entry to Israel in 2015, I think, stopped completely. You almost have zero entries. You do now have some entries from the Jordan border, and but that is something that I'm only reading about. I'm not completely knowledgeable about it. But basically, what I'm saying, we had an amount of asylum seekers here that we really denied them any rights, denied them an option to receive a status, to create some life for themselves. They're constantly going every 3 months, now a little longer after the struggle we had in 2018. But they have to renew this, it's called a non-conditional release. And just think how cynical that is. Non-conditional release means that these people are basically people that you can pick up and take at any moment and put them in jail. They don't. The status is a non-conditional release. And also the status claims that they're not allowed to work. But this is the only paper these people have, and this is the only paper that they allows them to work. It's like some sort of
Yeah.
craziness that was created by the government telling the Supreme Court, okay,
Hmm.
don't change it, but we will not. They're allowed to work with this piece of paper. It's ridiculous. So they hardly have any social securities, social services. They don't have they don't have any help.
They
The
don't
only
have any basic rights.
anything. The only
Yeah.
thing that is that the children could go to school because there's a law in Israel that each child is entitled to education. But in Tel Aviv, where most of the asylum seekers, and by the way, they're crammed into very, very poor neighborhoods, which creates clashes between the neighborhoods and the asylum seekers. And the reason they're clammed into these places, they're not given any, not only do they not have a status, and they don't have a checkbook, or their checkbook says that they are non-citizens, so they can't give checks to landlords saying, okay, we would like to rent a nice house in the center of Tel Aviv. It's not possible. It's simply not possible. So they have to stay in these very poor neighborhoods where the
Mm.
owners divided the houses into tiny units, very bad conditions, and the neighborhood is very mad, because of course if you have a very poor neighborhood and you have all these asylum seekers gathering together, so many of them had to stay in Tel Aviv, also because the human rights organizations are here in Tel Aviv, but also the fact that people in Israel don't know whether they can rent apartment to them, whether they can hire them. It's still very, people that are not in the south of Tel Aviv or not in Petah Tikva or certain specific cities that they work would call me and say, but I'm allowed to hire him because it says that he's not allowed to work. So they use this misinformation and, calling upon basically the
Mhm.
Israeli citizens not to let them become part of the Israeli society. So you have a very unbelievable, very sad situation where a lot of these children are in the schools of South Tel Aviv, studying, going to school with non-Israelis. There's not an Israeli child in these schools. They're all either asylum seekers or migrant workers. And of course, the level of education because of that falls. I don't know. I hope I gave you it in a nutshell. I
Yeah, I
just
mean,
wanted
it
to
is
say
very,
there's
very,
one more other
very.
thing I wanted to say. Israel does not allow them to have a driver's license. So if somebody wants to live in one city and work in the other city, he can't. If somebody has to drive his kids to school in the morning and he has 4 kids, he can't. He has to take them by bicycle or whatever. Basically, really. And also during the Corona, and also there's a few other things I want to say. They're working in Israel, okay?
Yeah, we might get with the next question. Okay, so let's have, because I got another question. Maybe you can tack into that one. Uh, because like as you say, it's very horrible. The living condition of the refugee is very horrible. You don't have basically any right as a human being. This is unheard of, and we know that all these refugees. We are talking about Eritrean right now. When they come to Israel, they come through a lot of traumas. They come through the desert and then the Sinai. In the process, they have been going through a lot of traumas. There were a lot of stuff going on over there. So, how does the trauma affect their daily life? Since you've been working closely with them, how does the trauma affect their daily life in Israel, and what can you tell us, about their life challenges?
Okay. So this is a very difficult point for me. Gets me very emotional. By the way, tomorrow I am going to the main hospital in the city of Tel Aviv, trying to give training to not the social workers, the psychologist workers there, trying to explain what happens to the refugees on their way, so they can understand this. This is something true, and all these years that they've been here, people have went through very difficult trauma. By the way, as you know, not only in the Sinai Desert or in their journey, but also in the countries of origin. We know that people were detained and locked and tortured in Eritrea, and of course, Sudanese also went through a lot of trauma in their countries, and we know that what happened through the Sinai Desert was horrendous, and it really impacts this. And Israel did not give them any not only not physical medical help, but did not treat the traumas that these people carry with them. And these traumas are very serious, and it causes, I think it brought upon, especially after the corona, a lot of drunkenness and addiction with drugs and addiction to gambling. We know that families have a very hard time to keep together. We know that I can, the way I perceive it, I see a lot of these children. By the way, the children are actually raised up by people that have, when you raise a child, I assume, especially in Eritrea, you have your whole family around you. These people are very young. They have children at a very young age with no surroundings to support them. But also you can see that the post-trauma is actually transferred to the younger generation. This is something Israel should have known, because we know that the Holocaust survivors, we're talking not only about the first generations of Holocausters, we're talking about now the third generation of Holocaust survivors. We know that it impacts the children and the grandchildren of the survivors. And I can actually see this in the children of the community. And of course, nobody's addressing it. So there's a lot of dysfunctional people in this community receiving no help whatsoever. With all the traumatized that was inflicted on them. And Israel cynically knows this, because, like, for instance, when they were sent to the Cholot detention center, the so-called open detention center, the center is very, very near where they entered from Sinai. So the scenery is very much the same. And also a lot of asylum seekers came into Israel, gather themselves up bravely. I'm in big admiration to the asylum seekers, that they succeeded after after they went through, to pull themselves together, work, and support themselves, support their families. And we know that they're also paying money both for what they were freed from Sinai, because there was, and also money to other relatives that are in Libya or Sinai, or families in Ethiopia camps and so on. So these people are working extremely hard. And once they were sent to Cholot, they were not allowed to work. There was nothing to do there. You're all day in a detention center. You're not allowed to work. And the trauma resurfaced. So Cholot was, I kept saying that Cholot was basically prepared to break them mentally. And it succeeded, by the way. A lot of asylum seekers that went through a lot and that was sent to Cholot, and they would break, and I would ask them, but you went through much worse situations. Why is Cholot your breaking point? And it says it brings back a lot. We have nothing to do. We're staying, we have to, all the memories coming back. We have to deal with these memories all day. When I was in Tel Aviv or a place like that, I would get up early in the morning. I would work until I was dead tired, and I would go back and sleep. And it sort of made me in a survival mode, but it was okay. Now it's difficult for me to deal with. So this is something I really want to say. Basically, I think what you have now, especially with the younger generation, the asylum seekers that came in a younger age, or the experience, as somebody told me, I think an Israeli said to me, and I thought it was it was true, that she says, an asylum seeker, you went through a lot of horrible things, but he had these few years as a young person, when growing up in Eritrea, he had some sort of normality. These people that came here when they were 12 or 13, they hardly had any normal chunks of their life, and they're separated from their parents, they're separated from their family. Basically, you have children coming in here by the age of 14 and starting to work to support themselves. They had no childhood. They had no way to, no education. they feel lost. They feel that their life is completely lost. They know they don't have a chance to work, or to reach education. They know also that they maybe will not be able to form a family. So this influences them very, very badly. All these things with the trauma and everything, it creates a very vulnerable society.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, very difficult situation for the refugees in general, and obviously we are talking about Eritreans today. With all the traumas and with all the challenges, the living conditions in Israel, I know that you have been working with a lot of Eritreans. So, how can you describe Eritreans, having all this situation, having all the challenges? How can you describe Eritreans? At the same time, does the Israeli people understand the trauma, the challenge they are facing for the refugees?
So, first of all, my personal experience, and this is why I'm very dedicated to this community, is I find this an amazing community. As I told you, they're very much inspiring me. I'm always inspired by the fact that they are very they help one another. This is a community that helps one another in situations that are very difficult. It's a community that has succeeded to build some sort of life to itself. You have these celebrations and the holidays and the all these kind of coming together, which I find is very helpful for them to continue with the hardship that they are dealing with. They're very hard workers, and I think the Israelis in general, after all these years, know that the Eritreans are very hard worker. They're the one first thing in the morning. Unfortunately, most of the jobs they are doing, especially with the Eritreans, are working in restaurants and not, they haven't succeeded to advance into proper jobs. But
Yeah.
so most of them are working or keeping, but most of the restaurant owners or perhaps little small shop owners have become, they trust these people very much. They sometimes I'm because I'm known as somebody that deals with the asylum seekers, and there were many demonstrations we had, and my name is like common between people that are employ the asylum seekers. I have many employers calling me, especially before Cholot. How can I prevent him from going to Cholot, so on and so forth. There are the connections between employers and asylum seekers. Not all the employers, of course, but employers and asylum seekers became actually a very, even more than for friendly relationships. Some of the employers really treat them as, I wouldn't say families members, but very close to them. And a lot of the employers tell me, my business wouldn't be able to function as a business without these people. I trust them. They're the one that opened the business in the morning. They're the one that closed the business in the morning. And people even say, I trust them more than I trust my family to work in our places. And that's always heartwarming for me. I mean, I always say, I know these people are very good people. But in general, the impression this Israeli society, people that do not encounter, and you have to understand, and this is something I'm always telling Israeli, and I even today I told in a news outlet, people are saying, but they brought a lot of criminal activity. They're involved in criminal, in also in rape and assault and so on and so forth. And I keep saying, that's not completely true. Maybe the activity that they are involved is what you call economical criminal. They steal bikes or phones or stuff like that. But it's not true that they are, most of them, involved in physical violence. It did change after Corona. I must admit, but the truth of the matter is that, unfortunately, I know that there is a lot of violence going on within the community. So these are the figures that the police are giving to the public. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of, unfortunately, prostitution and so on and so forth. But in the general eyes of the Israeli, this is a population mostly men, mostly young men, and therefore in our images as a society, They're violent, they're dangerous, nobody wants to live around them. It's very, very difficult to convince otherwise, even though slowly it became better. But what happened on Saturday, unfortunately, enforced all the stereotypes.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about the event that happens on Saturday. On Saturday, there was a huge Eritrean justice seekers protest that turned violent against the regime supporters. The police had been informed about the possibility of severe violence and bloodshed, and the request to cancel was rejected. Do you think that had the police taken all the necessary steps to shut the festival, the violence would have been stopped?
First of
Can
all,
the police be held accountable for failing to stop the violence?
yes, first of all, the police is accountable for all the violence that happened. I personally spoke to the head of chief of the Minister of Interior on Thursday. I reached a very high level, and I tried to convince the Minister of Interior to prevent this happening to actually occur. I mean, to the festival. And I know that the asylum seekers, through themselves or through lawyers, have notified the police with letters stating that they only have to look in what's happening in Europe and Canada and so on and so forth to see what happened in these events. So the police was notified. And I'll be even more frank, and I'll tell you that the police even, I know, notified the owner of the place that the event was supposed to take place.
Mm-hmm.
He received a notification, I understand, on Friday, and now he as well is also trying to sue the police. He received a notification that he has to take care that violence are going to happen. The thing is, there's two things that I would like to say about this. First of all, the police is very well aware of this issue of supporters and non-supporters. Personally, I have been in the police station in these last years many, many times, trying to explain to the police stations that this is the situation. And, we had violence occur throughout the years. I was there with a lawyer in 2018. We sat in a very big police station for like at least 6 hours. And the police station refused to take we brought with us people that could testify to a very violent act that took place. I don't know if you remember, in 2018, there was
Yes, I do remember there was a stabbing.
Right, in the middle of the day.
Yes.
We had videos of that, and we also had people that were brave enough to come forward and say, I saw this, and someone even that was slightly injured. The police would not take their take their testimony. But before I'm going to talk about the police, the taking their testimony or not, the police is kind of used to the fact that there's clashes between supporters and non-supporters. And I think the police assumed that it's going to repeat from the years prior to that, the issue of, the Independence Day celebration, where you have the police has been through this many, many times, and it felt like, okay, we can control this.
Yeah, we can handle it.
We can handle this. Now, the other thing is that you have to understand that Israel is going through many changes now. There are being demonstrations in the streets of Tel Aviv. I'm sure you're aware,
Yeah.
over 8 months now, and the police is stretched out. I'm also participating in the demonstrations of the Jewish Ethiopian community, and the police are being, I think, but also the head of the police has changed. The minister of what you call national security, which is responsible, he's a very, 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 very right-wing fascist, let's say, be honest. And he basically wants the police to send people to hospital. He's saying that about the white elite of this society. They're saying, if they're demonstrating, they are trying to prevent the main highway, whatever, you can send them to the hospital. That's basically his idea. And plus, he doesn't like the demonstrators, because basically He comes from the right wing, and he thinks that these are people that are against, when he's right, against the government. So he feels, and he himself, by the way, he was basically he grew up as somebody that would break the law constantly. He has many files himself, so it's ridiculous that he's the minister. He's responsible of security, internal security. But basically, you have people that are very racist in this government. People that are very that people are responsible for the police, because during the years we had many demonstrations that we did with the Eritrean both the Eritrean and Sudanese community. And during the years, the police and the asylum seeker community started building a rapport. The police started trusting the community, understanding that this is a lawful community, understanding that when things are agreed upon the asylum seekers and the police, the asylum seekers keep their word.
Their promise.
Yes, I would like even to give you a specific instance, if I have a few minutes. When we were involved in these big demonstrations against the Cholot detention center in beginning of 2014, I, as an Israeli, went to the police and signed that I am responsible for it, because the police had no contact with the asylum seekers at that point. And they asked me how many people would come to the demonstration, and I said something like 35,000 people, and they were like, no way. And they said, okay, you're not allowed to block the streets. And I said, but how are we going to transfer 35,000 people from the south of Tel Aviv? They wanted to do the demonstration in the center of Tel Aviv, in the Kikar Rabin Square. For many reasons, they wanted to do it. And they said, we don't care. They're not going to block the streets. So I came back to the asylum seekers, and what the agreement was, we would go out in groups of 100. We would walk only on the sidewalks, and we actually walked, very long way from the south of the city to the center. We didn't block the roads. Now you had Kikar Rabin full, completely packed. It was unbelievable. Children, women, everybody came to the Kikar, and we had the permit was until 2:00 in the afternoon. And I was like hysterical. I was telling the community leaders, but by 2:00 you have to finish. By 2:00 you have to finish. And I was standing there maybe at 1:30, and they weren't, nobody was closing this event. And I was completely hysterical. I was telling them, listen, I don't know what to do with you. The police will come, and by 2:00 sharp, okay? 35,000 people were not in the center, in the square. And the square was completely clean. I had to run to the hospital because there was an Eritrean child that was stabbed in the head. I don't know if you remember that. I was taking care of the family. I was running to the hospital. And then I got a call from the chief of the police, and he said, can you come back to the Kikar? And I was like, really? But why? We stood, we were on time. Everything is okay. And I was like moaning and groaning and say, he said, please come back to this. And I came back, and I was like, what do you want? And he said, you have to explain to me what happened here, because it was like at 1:30, I was looking at my watch, and I said, there's no way they're going to leave. And they left the square without a cigarette. Nothing was there. How did that happen? And I said, I told you, you can rely on the community. That actually built the trust that was between, especially the Tel Aviv police, but it also went into Jerusalem. They understood that what would be agreed with the community. Later on, the police stopped needing us as Israelis to sign as responsible. The community had their relationship with the police. They would organize it with the police. Everything went smoothly. So basically, the police was under the impression that, we know the community. Mm-hmm. We know the violence that is going to occur. We're going to be able to handle it. The other thing I want to say, and this is really important, that the community, I know the community knows this, but it's really important for the community to understand. Israel has a very great interest in its relationships with many dictatorships, but it has a great interest with the Eritrean dictatorship. As Eritrea, is sitting on the Red Sea. Mm. It's very strategic. Israel needs it. I understand that maybe there are also army bases in Eritrea, Israeli army bases in Eritrea. Israel wants to keep on a very good rapport with Isaias Afwerki. And I believe that Israel is the authorities in Israel, the police in Israel, is turning a blind eye to the fact that their supporters are here. It's allowing the embassy to have all its events. It's even more cynical than that, because many independent events, the guards, the people that were in the detention center in Saronim and Cholot would be invited to the Eritrean Independence Day. Can you imagine how humiliating that must be for people that are detained in Cholot? These people basically control their lives, send them, sometimes deport them, and they're taking part in the celebration of the Eritrean regime, basically. And people would send me pictures from inside the celebration, and it would drive them crazy. And I think it was not something done by chance. It was done, again, Israel is using a lot of psychology, technical or methods to create despair in the community and to leave. And I think the relationship with the Israeli and the Eritrean regime is also a tool with the Israeli government to create this. So it will always allow the Eritrean regime to do anything it wants within our territory. So the expectation, and I told this to the community, the expectation that the community has to prevent this event from happening are truly unrealistic. And what you had happen is that the events, when they started, first of all, the police was prepared for this event to happen in noon. And what happened is people started coming. I think the first bomb, the shock bomb, was thrown in 7 a.m. in the morning, which is extremely early. So I think, and it's especially on a Saturday, I think people started streaming, coming from Eilat, coming from different places into Tel Aviv, very, very early. The police was not quite prepared. And as I said, the chief of the police has changed the police that was responsible for the area of Tel Aviv here, because he didn't like the fact that he was treating the protesters, our protesters, in such a, how we need to call it, in a soft hand. So the person that was there had no experience yet, not with protests in Tel Aviv, not with protests in of course, the community. And I think it took by surprise the Israeli police that they started so early. And also, I understand from witnesses that were there, I sent the reporter there, they told me that it wasn't like any other demonstration that the Eritrean community had before. People were extremely fixed on not allowing this event to happen. And the police didn't seem to be a barrier. They just went through the police. And that's what I understood caused the police to panic and to use live ammunition, which never happened in Israel.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate event. But as you say, the police has been informed, and then they should have been prepared. But they may have also an interest of this happening because of the situation. They don't want to have like the refugees. So this might give also the Israeli government a reason to act, whatever they want to act. But in connection to this question, prior to the event, while justice seekers or the opposition camp are trying to stop the festival of hate legally, the regime embassy was mobilizing what they call a force front of young regime supporters to attack justice seekers. I'm going to show you a video here, which they were doing prior to the event. So they were organizing this one. This is, they call like the force front. All these young people, they did so many provocations. And then also they were calling for the justice seekers, if they try to show up at the festival, they will crush them. Basically, they were provoking all these pictures on social media. So they did so many provocations, which result in what we had witnessed on Saturday. So, should the government of Israel hold the Eritrean embassy responsible for what happened on Saturday? Many believe the embassy was the source of all the conflict that resulted in the city. Do you think that also the people, the Israeli people, especially residents of Tel Aviv, do you think that the embassy was the reason behind all these things? Do you think that, do they know that, or any impression about it?
Uh, since the event, the Saturday event, people like me are going to, as I said, the news stations and trying to explain this. The people of south of Tel Aviv, and also this, I think a lot of citizens of Tel Aviv, of Israel, are starting to understand that there is this issue of supporters and non-supporters. This is like, I mean, for many years I'm writing about it and trying to describe the situation. But I think now a lot of people of Israel understand it, and a lot of people of Israel are asking. So, if they're supporters, why are they here? Of course, and it's very difficult for the Israelis to understand this issue. But a lot of them are saying, "Okay, we don't care about their fights, their tribal fights. This is how we call them in Africa. We don't want these tribal fights here. We don't care."
Yeah. So as you say, you've been describing this one because you were part of the refugees. There were like supporters and non-supporters. But I'm sure many people might not know this one because you gotta be very close to know the community. But after the incident that happened on Saturday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called for a tougher action against the refugee. He demanded the deportation of all those who had broke the law. And on his way to Cyprus, the prime minister said he asked the ministerial meeting to deport 1,000 Eritrean refugees who are supporting the regime. How serious is the decision? Are we going to see those who are supporting the regime while asking refugee status deported soon?
You have to understand, Netanyahu is someone that will say things and then retreat what he said, as he did in 2018, saying that we will go through the how do you call the UN agreement to. Netanyahu is very untrustworthy. Netanyahu will say anything and then retreat on it. And Netanyahu, listen, you have to understand, okay? If Netanyahu is interested in relationship with the Eritrea regime, okay, he cannot, and he knows, by the way, he knows that he will not be able to deport the asylum seekers that support, let's say, the regime. He knows that he cannot be able to send them back. He knows that it's also dangerous for them. He knows that the UN will probably say that this is unlawful. And most of all, he doesn't want to get in a bad relationship with the president of Eritrea. He doesn't want any problems with him. He is not going to deport. And I know that the asylum seekers are very hopeful that the regime supporters are going to be sent back to Eritrea or deported. It's not going to happen. No one is going to be deported, okay? The thing is that I think that the request, okay, the asylum seeker request here in Israel should be very simple: to close the embassy. I don't think that the asylum seekers that are so-called supporters should be deported back. I think what should happen is that the embassy should be closed, and if it will be closed, a lot of problems will just disappear. My sense that a lot of the supporters, so-called supporters, are people that are being threatened through their family in Eritrea. I'm very much for the asylum seekers. With all these years I've been working the asylum seekers, I also come into houses of supporters. I deal with their children or whatever it is. And if you ask me, I'm not saying there are some people that came through flight to Israel and working directly with the embassy, but most of the Eritreans here, you had supporters, so-called, being jailed in Cholot. In my eyes, I do not believe that somebody that is supportive of a government would be willing to go to stay in a prison, a very difficult prison, if he's not a refugee. He went through Sinai, he went through everything. So I understand that the reasons of saying I'm a supporter or a non-supporter are very complex. I would not like to see the fact us sending people that I know that might be jailed or killed or whatever in Eritrea just because they are labeled supporters. That my personal view as a human rights activist. But I do agree that the Eritrean embassy should be shut down. Should be the ambassador should be sent back. The embassy here is a cause of a lot of problems. And I also think it's a more realistic thing to hope for. It's also not highly, there's not a lot of chances that would happen, but it's much more a realistic thing to ask for the state of Israel. And I know that this happened in Holland, I think somewhere around 2017 or 18. And I know that they closed the embassy. They did not deport these so-called supporters, but they closed the embassy. I believe that this is something that we should demand from the Israeli government. And there's another thing I want to say. For 2-3 years now, the Eritrean government does not allow an Israeli embassy to be in Asmara. There's no Israeli embassy now there. And I don't really understand. Normally, when your countries are have a mutual relationship, you have an embassy here and an embassy there. So I'm thinking maybe we can claim that since there's no Israeli embassy in Asmara, maybe there should be none in Tel Aviv as well.
Okay, so just follow up on this one. It's not only in Israel, but also many countries in Europe. They are, especially right now after the incidents happening, this is happening like all over the world. They were start to look in the asylum status of all these Eritrean refugees. Is there any legal or moral ground for the supporters to ask asylum anywhere if they are supporting the regime?
Again, I believe that I think these things have to be, as you said, looked into individual. Do you support the regime because you really believe in supporting the regime, or do you support the regime because you are afraid of the regime? Mm-hmm. One of the people here from the how do you call the population, the immigration population or whatever it's called, he's many years now, and somebody I truly hate, Yossi Edelstein. He's many years now, and we've always demonstrated across his house. But he said, I cannot check if somebody is a true supporter or a non-supporter. He says one day he's a supporter and the other day he's a non-supporter. And sometimes I feel the same because I know people that were non-supporters and now they are supporters. I feel there's a lot of people change their hearts for so many reasons that I'm not really sure. I think, as you said, the demand should be each asylum seeker, each how do you call it?
Refugee or asylum seeker.
Refugee determination should be evaluated personally. They should check whether this person deserves to be a refugee, to accept it as a refugee. I think that is basically the key that should be there. I think people, we don't know what's going on in people's lives or hearts. We really can't say. And again, as a human right, I'm very forgiving for people living in very difficult conditions, being away from their family and friends, being sometimes belonging to this or other church, and therefore it influencing them. My hopes are that we would not deport anybody to a situation where his life or liberty is in danger. That is basically but I really think that I think the most important thing is to check the refugee status.
And I can really understand from your point of view, as you say, you are like a human rights activist. Also, when you get to individuals' homes, you can see also people change their minds, for different reasons. But also at the same time, it's important also to make sure that people have legal status, or their refugee status based on the legal grounds. Because in other words, like if you don't have any issue on your country, but just being by, let's say, in Israel, making also an issue for those who are really have a life-threatening issue in their home country. So that's why so many people are asking, for individual check. Obviously, you cannot, put everybody into one basket. But the next question, anyways, is for this one. There are people who are doing all the dirty work for the regime. Okay, some of them were having like shotguns. I'm going to show you a video that
Yes.
has been circulating,
Yeah,
after
yeah.
the police dispersed the rioters and everybody. So they were going house to house and terrorizing individuals. They were terrorizing families. And then really, those kind of people, I believe they should be deported, because I can understand, things can happen, but going house to house terrorizing people is something very difficult to see, to watch. But let me show you, and then you can have your opinion on this one. Okay. So as you can see, this guy, one of these guys has a shotgun. So this was like a social gathering. They were celebrating, stuff happening back home. So those government supporters, as you can see, they come to the place, and they were really terrorizing. There was a child, a woman, and it's really very difficult to watch. To be frank,
Yes.
as you can see.
So first of all, I want to say that this is a video that I received from the community, and I transferred it to the news publications,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what started the investigation, as I understand. And you're right; it's very difficult to see. And I think what we have to understand, okay, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
that once somebody does a criminal act, and this is obviously a criminal act, somebody just threatening somebody verbally, okay? If I threaten somebody verbal, that is a crime. That is an act that I would actually have, as an Israeli, okay? I would go to jail if I verbally threaten somebody. And you have here group of people threatening, as you say, a social gathering, and you have children there, as you can see, and you have women there. This is something that the specific person, that specific group of people doing that should be in jail. First of all, they should be in jail. I believe that if we should treat them equally, and they should end up in jail. I'm not so sure. I don't really know whether it's the right idea to send them to Eritrea, because we don't know what lays that, unfortunately, we don't know what would happen to them in Eritrea. But basically, the first thing, these people should end up in through the system in jail. The issue of would these people? The question is like, do you think these people would have acted on behalf of the embassy or the regime if the embassy was not there? I think that you would have less activities like this. So I'm trying to say, let's see what the root causes of everything here. I'll tell you the truth. I know that some of them are families on both sides. I know people that are brothers. One brother is a supporter. One brother is a non-supporter, is against the government. So I think this is basically a very tragic thing for the Eritreans in general.
Mm-hmm.
I think they've been degraded into a situation where they have nothing to lose. All they have maybe is their nationality pride. Because you think of these people here, they're not accepted. They have very difficult life conditions, as I told you. They're being constantly told that they are infiltrators, not wanted. And I can sometimes see how they can be drifted towards the belonging to a group that has some sort of national pride. This is my thinking. So I think they should be, what they did is a criminal act, and there's no forgiving about that. These people, all of them should be in jail for quite a long time, if you ask me. I don't know about the issue of deportation, again, because I think that Eritrea is a very horrible regime. I
Yeah,
think
but the
every,
question comes for, of course, we know that Eritrea is very horrible regime, because we were from Eritrea, we know that, nobody
yes,
wants to
of
be
course.
part of the country. That's why we left. But the question comes is, if really supporting the regime. I mean, you can support the regime, that's fine, but don't do the dirty work of the regime. I mean,
That's what.
I don't have a problem, if someone is supporting the regime, that's fine by me. But if you
Mm-hmm,
start doing
mm-hmm,
all the dirty work of the regime, and then you become that regime, not like the one who come to support your family or whatever. So this is the question that many Eritreans asking. We were trying to separate between doing all the bad stuff and then also supporting. So I believe those people are crossing the line for most of Eritreans, not
mm-hmm,
only those but also in other places. And then
mm-hmm,
when they cross the line, and then many people like us, they were asking, then if they think that like the regime is okay, if they truly support the regime, and then they should
mm-hmm,
not have any business also staying
mm-hmm,
on those
mm-hmm.
countries. So that's what we as Eritreans are asking for the host countries, like to whatever take actions against those people, and at the same time also they the issue is going to keep continue, and also it's going to create problem for the host country.
Yes,
We as
I,
Eritreans, we don't want disturb the host country. They give
mm-hmm,
us the
mm-hmm,
opportunity, they gave
mm-hmm,
us a life. For many of us, they gave us new life, new opportunity. We were able to help our families and everything. And we feel very bad when we do all the bad stuff. When we see stuff happening in Tel Aviv, none of us feel happy or okay, because we should actually give back to the society that give us a life, and then give us so many opportunities. So
mm-hmm,
that's also another thing that as Eritreans see,
mm-hmm.
and obviously, but the root cause is the regime's embassy, and
Mm-hmm.
that should be closed. I think I agree on that one.
I agree with you truly that the fact that you as refugees are basically fleeing from your country, and then you have a situation where in the host countries you have these people that are basically a long arm of the regime itself, and it is extremely. I'm telling the people that interview me that I'm trying to tell them, describe a situation where you fled and then you end up in a place where the regime is still spying over you, threatening you, harming you, and it is very, very difficult. The question is whether you cut the snake from its head or you chop the snake to little bits. I think that the head should come off, and the head meaning the ambassador, and the embassy. They should be totally, totally, removed from the country. I think it's very bad for us in general that they're here. And I believe that, as you said, the requests should be checked, each request individually. And on top of that, if somebody has committed a crime, as we saw, and we know that a lot of them are involved in crimes, we know that it's not just pointing a gun, we know that they beat, and we know that they harm, and we know that they threat. If somebody commits a crime, he should be in jail, basically. He shouldn't be walking around just because he's claims to be an asylum seeker.
Yeah, I think I cannot agree more. The embassy is the source of all evil everywhere, not only in Israel, but everywhere. And then that should be, action should be taken against all embassies. I'm sure it will create a lot of peace and harmony within even our community,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
because if, as you already said it, like if it wasn't for the regime, probably this wouldn't have happened.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's very important. But after the incident on Saturday, what are the medias and the Israel people saying about what happened in Tel Aviv? What is their understanding on the situation, especially with regard to the involvement of the Eritrean embassy in Israel? But how is the people? How is the sentiment, and how is the understanding of the media as well?
So, as I said, people are starting to be aware of this issue, that there is supporters and non-supporters. People are starting to understand a little bit even more the issue of, because people in their daily life don't really, they're not very much interested in anybody else's life. Like, okay, let's
Yeah, I
so
understand.
people are going on their daily life, and it's not, and being an Israeli is not easy for anybody. This country is very difficult for many reasons. We have, whether it's, we're also divided very much by the Netanyahu government. People are extremely against him and extremely supportive of him. So people are, I'm not sure we're
There's a
not
lot
going to.
of polarization, like what we have in our country.
Exactly. I'm not sure we're not going to end up clashing. And you also have a lot of the attention of security attention with the Palestinians. We having people being killed in the middle of the streets of the biggest city in Tel Aviv or wherever. So people are, and also it's very difficult economically to, the economics are very hard here, and the government isn't helping it at all. It's creating even more uprising. So, and you have different groups in Israel. You have the Sfaradim, the Ashkenazim, you have the Ethiopian Jews. People are all very, everybody is tired of everybody, and so it's not easy. I have to say one thing. In 2018, I was the one that started the campaign of non-deportation. Okay, we did it by the I don't know if you saw the displays of the slaving auction cells, and I felt very much alone. I felt, me and my friends were alone. We don't know how to face this issue of deportation coming to us in the speed of light. And in a very, I would always say, in a miracle form, the Israeli public stood up for the community. The Israeli public that does not, mostly now that it's there are a lot of demonstrations, but in the past they're not. They actually came out to the streets and said no to deportation. So the Israeli public was kind of supportive, and I was taken by surprise. It was very emotionally for me. I mean, I really felt that there was, I don't know, a miracle happening, because we succeeded to stop something that the government was intent to do. I think the Israeli public, so many years have also passed, and a lot of Israelis do not meet on a daily basis asylum seekers. They only hear about them in the news and how they're blah blah. A lot of Israelis came to terms with the fact that these people are here. Of course, you have your haters, but a lot of people said, okay, they said, but they didn't go into detail why they came, why these people are, from who are they fleeing, where is Eritrea at all? I mean, what is it? Where it's like completely. So they don't go into that depth and don't go into that detail. They just want to go about their lives. Now they feel, through the visions of what they saw on Saturday, and please excuse me, because these are not my opinions, and of course they're not everybody's opinion, but why do we need these barbaric African people here? I feel we lost so much. I am going, as I said to you, from one station to another, and people are telling me, but they're violent. Okay, so they are against their government, but why would they come out with all the sticks? Why do they come out with why did they act like this? Why did they break all the stores around? Why did they create such damage? And we were afraid. People tell me we were in our houses and we were afraid to go out. We felt like we were in a war zone. This is not a very good thing that happened to the community. I think we're going to have a problem now. And when Netanyahu is saying we have to deport them or whatever, there's support for that in the public at this point. So that's a big problem. And people say to me, we don't care if I'm trying to explain, it's not an issue of two groups fighting. It's an issue of a group that fled dictatorship, and these other people are the long arm of this dictatorship. I'm trying to explain that Israel has something to do with it, because Israel is not preventing these people to act, the supporters. Israel did not prevent this event to take place. But people are tend to see it as a very, this is not our issue. We don't care. We don't want this in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand, the frustration of the community. It's obviously because, uh, the news media were describing this is the whatever happened in on Saturday was they haven't seen it in the last 1 years after the second Intifada. That means like the city was in peace. But again, all this problem is created by the regime's embassy, and then
Mm-hmm.
I think we hope that we can educate the people of Israel, and then whatever the root cause is, if you cannot take the root cause, I think the issue is going to be there. I don't think that issue, because next year or whatever, after 6 months, things will happen, same thing is going to happen. So I think this is a real issue. But I'm almost finishing up my questions, and then the last thing that I want to ask is, you have been working with a lot of Eritreans, and also the non-supporters, mostly maybe. So, in your opinion, how can the Eritrean justice seekers have a good and effective impact on Israel people and politicians in their fight for justice? How can they approach the people? How can they educate? What can be done, not only within from inside but also from outside? Because so many people are now looking into this issue. They were asking, how can we help? What can we do? So what do you think is the best way that people can help on this issue?
You're asking me in a very difficult point at this moment, because as I told you, I feel that we have lost a lot of points. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how we are going to convince the Israeli society that the Eritreans are not violent people. I'm not really sure how to do that at this point. I really don't know. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And also I'm thinking about. I'm worried more about what is going to happen now. I don't know how much you are aware of the fact that the people that are arrested were arrested by on Saturday. They were processed through the court, and the court was tending to release them because there was no true evidence. The police did a bad job in bringing evidence, and we were hoping to see them released today. And the government, the as I told you, Ben Gvir, the Minister of the National Security, decided that the court is not giving, and it's also everything is also taking part in their idea to create reform of the justice system, of course, so-called reform. And he's saying, you see, the justice system won't allow us to rule, so we're going to override the justice system now, and we are going to take these people into it's called I don't know how you say it in English, I'm sorry, but basically they're going to be they actually are in custody now, which is custody that has nothing to do with what they did or not. It doesn't matter. They're going to be jailed in specific jails, and they are going to be not going through any, they're not going to be blamed of anything. They're not going to go through the justice system. They're just going to be jailed for how long? Till they leave. Basically, that is what is causing me to lose sleep at this point. I'm afraid very much. You have fathers, you have people that have processed to Canada. These are people that are already part of society, and now they're jailed. And I don't know how we are going to how are we going to protect them. So
So what can we do to help? Is there anything that they can help people, like with lawyers, with financial support, to have
first
like
of
good
all,
lawyers? What
yeah,
can people do?
first of all, I offered the society, the community. I have a friend that is a lawyer that helped me a lot, both with the. He's also an activist, a very well-known activist. He's very a popular activist in Israel. He's a lawyer, and I really wanted him to come and take part. And he understands this because we're very good friends, and we've been, working together many years now. So he knows a lot about the issues of the asylum seekers, and I really wanted him to be, but I didn't succeed causing the community to hire his services at this point. But basically, so first of all, yes, I think there's going to be financial aid needed for the families that are left now without the fathers, without the supporters. We're facing something very bad now. We're going to need maybe financial support to, at the end of the day, maybe not now, but hire lawyers to fight this policy, not even the issues of each individual person but these policies need to be fight, because what Israel is doing now I think, is against the international law. They're taking into custody people without going to court. They're not being blamed for anything. They're just being jailed. So we're going to need to fight this. This is going to have to be a campaign. I also suggested to many people that spoke to me from abroad these past few days. I think Israel needs a little bit of shaking at this point. I think that we need to try and help, and people outside of Israel understands what's happening here. We need the international community to understand that Israel is endangering asylum seekers. It has been endangering them ever since they came, but especially now, the fact that they are creating a situation where they allow the regime to work freely within the borders of the country, and also the fact that Israel is enforcing unlawful acts upon the community, which may lead to people saying, okay, I'm leaving. Where am I going to leave? Whether it's Eritrea or Uganda, it's very, very dangerous. So I think the international community needs to know what's happening. I suggested perhaps having demonstrations across in front of embassies, Israeli embassies around the world, together at specific dates, and asking for three things: for Israel to check the asylum seekers, to check the requests of the RSDs, to give the asylum seekers some sort of status that enables them to stable their lives, and to close the embassy. I think these are three demands that have to come from outside now. It's not enough that we as activists or the community asks them. I think Israel has to be basically embarrassed in front of the world is how it is treating these asylum seekers for so many years. This is how I see the help that we can receive from the community around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, actually, already worldwide demonstration is being organized. There is a demonstration coming to Israeli embassies in all these different countries. So they already started some places. They have one in London on Friday, but I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, everyone is going to demonstrate in front of the Israeli embassies. And those are the most important demands, as you mentioned. Everybody wants that embassy to be shut down, and then everybody also wants all these non-supporters, especially those who truly oppose the regime, would get really harmed by the regime if they have to be returned. So we need some sort of, legal papers for them, at least to get stabilized or whatever, to have their life put back into normal. And then for those who's been the right arm or the long arm of the regime, we want the Israeli government to check on all of them. We cannot put a blanket on everyone, but at least on those criminals who been doing all these dirty works, maybe also organizing. Maybe also some of them also maybe putting pressure on others to join. Threatening them to be part of them. So. It's a lot of demand, but we don't know how much the government can listen. But I really appreciate for coming out and giving us the insight of the situation right now in Israel. Finally, I have all my questions asked. If you have any message that you want to send to the supporters of the regime and non-supporters, I know you have been working with them for so long, and so please have this opportunity to convey your message. Whatever message you want to send to them.
And I think I spoke about how much I appreciate this community, how much I appreciate their endurance and the fact that they are a beautiful community, and I hope they will stand tall. I hope they will still help one another as a community, and I just wish for you all that this regime will end, but until the regime will end, that you will succeed to continue staying as a proud community, a community that we all have something to learn from you, and basically that's it.
I mean, I really appreciate that. On behalf of my people, also, I would like to really appreciate, the support you are giving to this to our community. They really are in need of people like you because it's very, very important. We know that it is very, very tough for all Eritreans in Israel. We know their life is full of challenges. They don't have anything that they can say ours. They always live from day to day. They, from one night to the next night. So we really want all good things to happen for them. Our heart always goes with those refugees in Israel, and we hope that good things will come out of the situation right now. And we will definitely support our people. Everyone is on their side right now. And definitely also support people like you who are supporting our community. So I just would like to give you heartfelt appreciation, on behalf of everyone. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for everything. And hopefully we may have another this kind of discussion in the future whenever needs come. But
I'll be glad.
Yes. And then for today, I really appreciate, it's almost like 1:45 or whatever on your time. And then that means a lot to my community, coming out this late. So really appreciate. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sigal.
Okay, good night from us, from Israel.
كدالو إرتراوي يعرب عبدو تلمنيانا يعرب عبدو 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 سلاينا تدخيمو مكرانا تزازيمو والحنا بلو مسيلا بتسعة آهلة دقيم يلن معدو شكرنا نفاسي وسلو متغغب كينولو وتعزبنا تدالو إرتراوي يعرب عبدو تدمنيانا يعرب عبدو تدالو إرتراوي يعرب عبدو تدمنيانا يعرب عبدو كعرب بري زفا صنيح عتاريلنا نديو كم تمن غريح إرترامنا بلي كمسل بعافو أي بديرنا نديو انتاي كغديف سواره بيلوس أنا هبتن كيفو يسنا بتالو بسلا غديفو تدالو إرتراوي يعرب عبدو تدمنيانا يعرب عبدو تدالو إرتراوي يعرب عبدو تدمنيانا يعرب عبدو مني خايب تمرر زل خايب نمرع لنا نقرم عدنا اخدم عيكريبو عبدن فزنخنا مصانا مني خيب تروبا زل خيب نمرع لنا نقريم عدي تزي سقوقنا تواهي وفردي مصانا نملسلو وان أخيلو تعاليقنا فقار خلو ملك فريسو فتحرقيسو وقين وري وقين ካብ ሃገርና ክጠፍእ بعد عديتاتك نكز عدنا سلام كخوني سلام كخوني سلام كخوني سلام كخوني سلام كخوني سلام كخوني عبيت عبيت متانا عدي متانا نتوم زعقبونا مسكينا قبيتنا خطط حزينا متانا 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 حبنا عدنا كمنيا نطفي بمتصابنا حلل بليرنا حلل بليرنا دفعنا بكتس بمتصابنا حبنا عدنا كمنيا نطفي بمتصابنا حلل بليرنا دفعنا بكتس بمتصابنا